Okay, welcome back to part two of this First World Parliament story, written by George Lippard, who was a member of the Rosicrucian Fraternity. So this second part is going to be on the Rosy Cross. So it starts off talking about the guy in the last, in the first part, who is the solitary figure, stood veiled, speechless and motionless near the rock, and that starts talking about him here. And again, I'll have the video, or I'll pause the video here every once in a while to kind of look up words or terms maybe that I don't understand, so I'm not in the dark, and for anyone who's watching will not be in the dark either. So only one in the secret band knew his name and history. The time now came for that man to speak. He came from the shadows and stood disclosed in the light, his tall form arrayed in the gray garb of a peasant standing distinctly into view. His features were darkened by exposure to the wind and sun. His large brow projected over eyes which shone steadily with an exchanging luster. Those eyes shone into every heart, and all the brethren in the cavern felt that a great soul was embodied in their light. This man in the coarse peasant garb leaned one hand, cramped and knotted by toil, upon the shoulder of the veiled form. In a voice harsh and abrupt he began to speak. He spoke of a secret order extending all over the world, and dating its origin back to that dim time when history becomes a fable and chronology a shadow. Of the rites, symbols, and customs of the order, which spoke to the heart, through the eye, and formed a universal language, intelligible to brothers of every race and clime. Of the most sacred sign of the order, which was written on the pyramids of Egypt and the monuments of Mexico, and stamped upon the dumb stone and mortar of past ages. In every quarter of the globe, the most sacred sign, a cross placed upon a globe, and lighted by the rays of a rising sun, and therefore called the Red or Rosy Cross. This cross, placed upon a dark globe, with the dawn breaking over its darkness, was the emblem of the great purpose of the order, the regeneration of the millions of mankind by three great ideas: union, freedom, brotherhood. The globe was a symbol of union, the light breaking upon it from the darkness, an emblem of freedom. The cross standing upon the globe and blushing into radiance in the fast coming light was a type of brotherhood. This order was known among men, known only in vague superstition or supposition and unaccredited tradition, as the Brotherhood of the Rosy Cross. As the brother in the peasant garb went on, his harsh voice became melodious. His manner, no longer hesitating, grew firm and bold. He traced the history of the brotherhood from the far gone ages down to the present time. In language vivid and eloquent, he pictured the elaborate ceremonial, the giant organization, the fascinating mystery which characterized the order, and made its power felt over the world in all times like the hand of God. And he starts speaking here, it looks like. And yet, with all this power, these symbols that form a common language for brothers of all nations, these rites that elevate with their beauty and bewilder with their mystery, with all its powers, felt through all ages, over all the world, like the hand of God, behold the degradation of mankind. In vain our labor, in vain the labors of our fathers, in vain this tremendous organization, in vain the universal language, the rites, the symbols, all in vain. Man still bleeds under the feet of priest and king. The world is still given up to Satan. Even that holiest name which we have written upon our banner, embalmed in our hearts, consecrated with the baptism of our tears, even brotherhood has fallen prostrate. afraid of the darkness which broods over the earth, trampled into dust by the iron feet of evil. These words thrilled through the cavern, and a breathless stillness fell upon every tongue. Faces wet with tears that glittered in the dim light attested the truth, the power of the speaker's words. Still resting his knotted hand upon the shoulder of the unknown, the peasant in the gray garb continued. But the contest is not yet over. Brotherhood is clouded by a mist of blood-red smoke, but it is divine. It is eternal. It will live when the stars have faded from the sky, for it is of God, and therefore cannot die. But we must embody the idea of brotherhood not only in rites and symbols, but in such a form that the meanest of earth's trodden children may behold it and love it. Do you hear me, my brethren? This idea of brotherhood, nay, this eternal fact, this deathless manifestation of God, must be embodied into a form that will speak to the hearts of men, and through their hearts regenerate the world. Do this, cried the Swede, and kings and priests exist no longer. Every face was lifted in earnest hope to the visage of the speaker, and a murmur filled the cavern, a murmur swelled by many tongues, but with only one meaning. Let the divine truth of brotherhood be embodied in a form that will speak at once to the hearts of men, and our work is done. Man will indeed be free. There will exist no longer on the face of the globe either a lord or a slave, to blaspheme by their existence the goodness of our Father. But how shall the idea be embodied? In what form shall we personify the holy truth? Listen, my brothers, and I will tell you. We will embody this idea in the history of some individual life, whose every word shall melt the cells of man into tenderness and love. Shall we take the idea of some great philosopher, some of those weird sages of their ancient time, who surveyed the world from the casement of their cells and reasoned boldly upon man, but could not feel for him? Shall we summon Pythagoras or Plato, or even that bravest and most manful of them all, Socrates? Ah, I see the smiles steal over your faces. I hear your murmurs. What have philosophers to do with the millions of mankind? Have they suffered any moment of their lives that stern martyrdom which is ever the lot of the poor man, from his birth to his death, the martyrdom of poverty, that is no couch for its tired head, but in the grave, the martyrdom of toil, that is without a hope in this world or the next? Have these philosophers drunk of the poor man's cup? Have they wept with him in his desolate home? Have they measured his anguish, or sounded the depths of his immeasurable despair? Away then with philosophers, cold reasoners, shrouding themselves in the mountain cloud of sophistry. They never descend to the plain and feel with the millions who are only born to be trampled and to die. The world does not demand abstractions. It calls even from the kennel of its degradation, it calls for some great heart to feel for its despair, and win it tenderly into light and love once more. Shall we embody this idea of brotherhood in the life of some priest, or tell the world how lovely it looks, how wonderful and sublime in the life of some king? As well embody the idea of heaven in the image of a satyr, or personify the angel tenderness of childhood in the dusk countenance of Satan? No, away with priests and kings. Away with all like these who do not live in the same world with the millions of mankind. But we will give this idea, or this shape, color, and voice. We will embody the principle of brotherhood in the life of a mechanic. His words were followed by breathless stillness, and then the murmur rose. Where will you find a mechanic who has risen from the hut of the poor man into the light of fame? In the life of a worker toiling with the workers of the human race, a son of the poor, living and dying for the poor. Listen, my brothers, and do not treat with scorn my crude legend of other days, but I will tell you to the story of the mechanic whom you seek, the son of the poor whom you desire. One day, in the ages long ago, the son of a carpenter looked out from the window of his father's workshop, and beheld his brothers and sisters, the poor, trodden down under the gathered infamies of 4,000 years. His garments were very rude, clad like a child of the people. He wiped the laborer's sweat from his brow, and from that workshop window he cast his eyes over a world in darkness and in chains. A fire that was of God suddenly lighted up his eyes. That forehead, damp with the sweat of toil, became radiant with a thought. His lips unclosed, and he uttered the travail of his soul in these brief words. Over all the earth, one sound swells up to God. It is the groan of the poor man, who has no joy in this world and no hope in the next. Then, as if the voice from God had penetrated his soul, the son of the carpenter laid aside the tools of his father's craft, and clad as he was in the coarse garb of labor, yet with a thought shining over his brow, went forth into the world, and said to the poor, as he met them on the highway, or saw them bending under the hot sun in the rich man's fields, or beheld their wan faces from the windows of the prison, Brother, there is a God in heaven. He marks the sparrow's fall. Think you then that he looks unheedingly upon the anguish of his children, the poor who bear his image, and have every one of them a ray of his eternity in their hearts? Such words as these, thrilling from the lips of a carpenter's son, stirred the hearts of the poor. They followed the young man by thousands, now by the shore, now on the slope of the mountain, now in the desert woods. He talked to them as much with his radiant forehead and calm deep eyes as with his voice, and he always ended his teachings with a word like this: God is our Father, and all men are his children. I might spend the hours of this silent night in telling you how this son of the carpenter dwelt with the poor, shared the crust of the poor, wept with the poor, lived for the poor, and died for the poor. As for the rich man, whether he appeared in the form of the priest or as the king, the son of the carpenter only spoke of him with pity, with reproach, with scorn. His mission was for the poor. And without arms, without priest, clad only in his humble garb, he spoke to the poor of his native land, and his voice moved the earth like the pulsations of the heart of God. He died at last after a brief mission of 3 years. He died, I need not tell you how. What death is reserved for those who endeavor with a single heart to do good to man? Not the death of a pampered priest, who, reclining on silken couches, embosomed in the chambers of a palace, looks with sorrow too deep for tears upon the rich viands and the genial wines, which he cannot take with him to the grave. Not the death of the conqueror, who makes himself a couch of the bodies of the slain, and expires most royally, a tiger clad in glossy fur, crouching upon his victims and tearing them with his fangs as he dies. No, but the death of a felon nailed to an abhorred tree, which towered alone and hideous upon the heights of a craggy steep, with the black sky above it and the dark mass of countless spectators around and beneath it. This was the death of the carpenter's son, who had said to man that religion consisted not in the palaces or jails, nor in priests or in kings, nor in churches or costly ceremonials, but marked the simplicity of the carpenter's son in loving one another. Oh, that I could paint to you the radiant forehead and earnest eyes of this carpenter's son, and show him to you as he lived among men, their brother, clad like themselves, their friend, for he said to them, God is our Father. But he has been dead many centuries. Behold him, not as he walked the sands of his native land, but as he is. He swept the cloak aside, which enveloped the limbs of the unknown. The cavern echoed with a cry of amazement and terror. For there, very near the light, towered the leaden image, whose forehead stamped with despair, and motionless eyes full of unutterable anguish, the form clad in the garments of toil, seemed to imprison a living soul. It was the image of the imprisoned Jesus. This is what priest and king, and the mass, who for centuries have followed a dead form and wholly missed the spirit, have made of the poor and beautiful spirit of the carpenter's son. They have robbed man of his brother, his friend. They have confined the soul of the mechanic in the creed and ritual of their church. They have taken to themselves that man of Nazareth, who never spoke of priest or king, but with pity, reproach, or scorn. Brothers, be it our task to take this son of the carpenter, to separate his loving spirit from church and creed, and lift him once more before the eyes of millions, not as the incarnation of a church or the imprisoned Christ of a ferocious superstition, but as the carpenter's son, who first embodied the truth of brotherhood and made it bloom in the hearts of men. With these three words, the carpenter's son, we can regenerate the world. We will go to the poor. We will ask them not to believe in the Trinity or in the unity of God, not in the Catholic, nor in Protestant, nor in Buddha, nor in Muhammad. We will not waste time in comparing speculations or analyzing creeds. Armed with this Christ of the poor, we will say to the poor, he was a poor man, such as you are. Like you he toiled. Like you he hungered. At the graves of poor men like you he wept. He lived for you he died. Then listen to his voice, which utters all truth in simple words. Love one another. The peasant, whose animated features contrasted with the motionless lineaments of the image by his side, now glanced around from face to face, speaking by turns to every one of his brothers. As he spoke, his voice became tremulous. His sunburnt features were set with tears. And can we not accomplish the great work for man? Is there a brother here who can say no? Who has the heart to say it? Here we are, men of all nations, colors, and creeds. Can we not join our hands around the rock as though it were an altar and sacrifice our prejudices, our creeds at the feet of the carpenter's son? Mohammedan, I speak to you. In your traditions you have read of Jesus the prophet. Do you object to Jesus the carpenter's son? Hindu, your traditions speak of a mysterious incarnation, of a sublime manifestation of God enshrined in the flesh. Can you refuse to acknowledge the love and spirit of God enshrined in the form of a carpenter's son? Protestant, it is your boast to read the written word of God. Can you refuse the carpenter's son? Catholic, your traditions speak of church, of authority, of popes invested with godlike power, in men sunk beneath the degradation of brute creation, and yet, amid this horrible mass of error, there is here and there a word, a true word of the carpenter's son. Are you willing to sacrifice church authority, pope and council, at the altar of brotherhood, at the feet of the carpenter's son? Deist, it is you I appeal. It is your delight to cherish the idea of one supreme God, only revealed to man by the forms of external nature. Do you see God in the leaf and flower, and yet refuse to behold him in the radiant forehead and peasant garb, the deathless words of the carpenter's son? Atheist, yes, there is one in the band who cannot believe in the existence of a God. Let me have a word with you, my brother. Let us talk with each other in kindness. You are, perchance, so constituted that the power to believe is not in your nature, all reason and no faith, and yet your heart beats warmly for the good of man. It is your earnest desire that all men may be indeed brothers. Can you find in the page of any history, in the record of any age or country, a spirit at once so loving and so actual, so like a God, and yet full of sympathy for man, as that of the carpenter's son? Point to me to the page, produce the record, and I will love you all the better. His eye gleaming, his forehead radiant, the impassioned peasant glanced around, and paused, as if to note the effect of his words. There was stillness, and then the air was full of sobs and groans. They were not altogether sobs of anguish, groans of sorrow. They rose from their seats, they gathered round the sunburnt peasant, and rent the air with incoherent cries. Strange words were audible amid their cries. It is the truth which our fathers sought for ages. It is the great secret which will regenerate the world. Not the Christ of theology, not the Catholic Christ, nor the Protestant Christ, but the Jesus of the heart, the carpenter's son, separate from all creeds, and only known as the incarnation of brotherhood. The peasant took in his hand the veil which he had lifted from the dumb face of the image. His form was raised to its full stature. His eyes burned as with fire from heaven. Hold, Do I understand you, my brethren? Are you willing to bury your creeds at the feet of the carpenter's son, and believe only in the brotherhood which shines from his face? Is it so? Then let us look for the day after the long night of hopeless evil. And I, too, am willing to offer up my creed at the feet of the carpenter's son. Listen, for I have a confession to make. I have been educated to believe that Christ was in truth the very God, that the awful being who made the stars and dwelt in eternity was present, living, throbbing in the breast of the Nazarene, was enshrined in the carpenter's son, made manifest in the flesh of that humble son of the poor. This I was taught to believe, and it was to me a holy thought. The omnipotence became a suffering child of toil, and dwelt for a while very humbly in the huts of the poor, and died, feeling every pang of mortal anguish, upon a felon's tree. Died for you, for me, for us all. Yes, he may descend from his calm grandeur as the father of his country, and mingle in the herd of kings, of tyrants, of conquerors, bartering immortal glory for the bauble of an hour, or Babel, or something weird word. A small, showy trinket or decoration, or a baton formerly used as an emblem by jesters. Okay. Where was I? Okay. Then woe to America and woe to man. The new world will become the theater of battles without an object, bloodshed without an aim. It will become a land of robbers and of graves. The freedom which the deliverer might have achieved in all its details in the year 1783 will be postponed until 1890. A terrible postponement, a fearful delay only marked by murder in various forms, by petty kings conflicting with each other under various names. Let it therefore be our care, my brethren, to leave to our children as a holy trust the life of this deliverer. Yes, his life. A brother of our order will go to him as he prepares for battle, and confront him with a dagger and a sword. This sword is consecrated for thy defense, so long as thou art true to thy country and to man. This dagger is consecrated to death the moment thou art false. Let us write it in our records. Let us teach it in our solemn ceremonies, that upon the truth or falsehood of this deliverer, who will come in the year 1775, hangs the destiny of mankind for at least 3 centuries. Does he prove true? Then the fire of brotherhood lighted by the apostle in the wilds of America in 1682 and defended by the deliverer in 1775 will illuminate the world. The name of that deliverer will become the universal word for freedom. Does he prove false to his great trust? Ah, that picture is too dark. It spreads before me, but I dare not contemplate its incredible details. In case he faithfully fulfills the awful trust confided to his hands, then behold the future of America and of the world. America, as I have said, will then in truth become the young heart and the young brain of a decrepit earth. The pulsations of the heart and the thoughts of that brain will shake the world. France, beautiful France, the land desecrated by religious wars and saintly massacres, will be the first to feel the throbbings of that heart, and echo the name of the new world deliverer amid her songs of brotherhood. France will be chosen by God to fight that first battle on the soil of Europe in the cause of man. The heart sickens and the eye grows dim, but to gaze upon the details of that battle fought by France in the name of men against priests and kings of an enslaved world. Even now I see it. It is there, that solitary glimpse. It is a river of blood swelling fast into an ocean, with a corpse upon every billow. It is a people, degraded by the slavery of centuries, suddenly transformed into a horde of demons, who not only sweep priest and king into the bloody wave, not only level palace and jail beneath their crimson feet, but, O God, can it be, they blot the name of God from the sky, and write upon the grave, there is no immortality, death is but a sleep. At this period there will arise in France a prophet of blood. He is there. I behold him standing amid millions of slaves, drunken with their first breath of freedom. His throne, a strange engine of murder erected on a platform with an axe gleaming from its timbers. A slender man with a haggard complexion, eyes filled with injected blood, features compressed, as with the impulse of an unrelenting and ungracious and unforgiving will. He stands upon the platform and shouts to the free slaves in a shrill voice, as the rich, the noble, and the beautiful fall headless at his feet. More heads, he shrieks, more heads for the altar of the revolution, not brotherhood. More blood to wash the record of the poor man's wrongs from the history of ages. The rich have had the world long enough. It is now the day of the poor. It will be a terrible day for kings and for the rich men who believe in kings when this Messiah of carnage comes from the cloud the a lurid meteor shining with a pale, gloomy grandeur over a world of blood. He will arise in France, I say. He will arise after the deliverer of the new world hath done his work, and he will prepare the way for the coming of the crowned avenger. And even he will feel the divine beauty of the carpenter's son, and hope for a calm time of brotherhood after the tempest of infernal passion is over. At last he will fall beneath the gory wheels of revolution, beneath those wheels which were hurled onward by his own arm. But in the moment of his fall, he will foresee the coming of the blessed day of brotherhood. Nay, he will die upon the unknown engine of murder, which was his throne. By the very axe which has drunk the blood of royalty and beauty, he will die wretched and a cursed thing, hated and accursed because so he thought and acted. His last groan chorused by the demon yells of that mob, who were yesterday his brethren, but in his last moment a hope will brighten over his glassy eyes, and his clotted lips will tremble with the accents of prophecy. After me a crowned avenger comes. When my body is in the ditch, and my name given out to all the world as a proverb of loathing, the crowned avenger will start from the people. He will write his name upon the globe in characters of fire. He will avenge me. Without me, this crowned avenger could never have appeared. I have prepared the way for him. I go to darkness, and no one pities me. And he, too, will be crushed beneath the weight of his greatness. He, too, will prepare the way for another and a nobler man. And when the day of that nobler man, that universal liberator, comes, when nations and empires and dynasties and sects and creeds have crumbled into dust before the light of brotherhood, and the freed earth shall glow with gladness under the eyes of God, then shall justice be done to my memory, and men shall no longer couple my name with curses, but speak of me as one who sacrificed not merely life, but fame for the sake of the poor. Pretty interesting stuff there. So it sounds like kind of like a prophecy that was told long ago, and it's kind of being retold here in a way, because this was written in, I think, 1880 something, I believe. So I think this is their mystery school's kind of prophecies here that were told of long ago. Pretty interesting stuff, and it looks like next up comes the Supreme Chief of the Rosy Cross. Let's see, I think it's getting pretty close to the end here, maybe. I think I'll separate this part out to a different video. Part 3, probably. Yeah. Still a ways to go here, looks like. Oh, not too bad. So, thanks for everyone who's watching, and again, I just want to say these videos are for people who are truly interested. I know that number is not very large, but here it is. So thanks for watching, and stay healthy.